I want to know, like, the concept of death dreamer is just fascinating. When I heard you introduce yourself as that, and then I heard the podcast that you had sent me about it, my mind was blown. But how did that concept come about in your life? Did you hear it from someone? Was death always interesting to you? Where did it stem from?
So death was always interesting for me.
Okay.
I loved like ghost stories. I used to write my own ghost stories. And I was super into graveyards, and I think my family also is like, I don't know, their relationship with death is extremely dramatic, right? So it's like somebody or something, an animal, a family member dies, and there's no space for like anything except a very extreme sad reaction, right? And so I think like the ghost stories and kind of like my curiosity about death stemmed from that like very visceral strong reaction that was always present and connected with death in my family.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting that we're having this conversation here because my friends here have like a lot of animals. And one thing that my friend said to me that really resonated with me in terms of like my relationship with death is she said to me recently, like, she has a young daughter, and she said, like, I want my daughter to be really comfortable with death so that death doesn't have to always be this like negative thing for her, right? Like that it can just be like a very comfortable part of life. We had a chicken, the chicken got eaten. We loved the chicken's not here anymore. You know, that type of thing.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh wow, that's so interesting because that was so not how death was perceived in my family and still isn't, you know? So it's like that difference of just like how can we dream into existence a way to let go with like peace and grace and it not have to feel so heavy, or it can feel however it feels, right? But that like there's space to talk about it, there's space to process it, there's space to cry, but there's also space to laugh and find the gratitude. And I know there's this book Tuck Everlasting. Did you guys ever read that book?
I read that when I was young.
Yeah, I read it when I was young, and it really also impacted my perception on death because basically in the book, this woman, the female like lead character, meets this beautiful man. He's part of a family where they have found like a spring that gives you eternal life. And so they've been living for like hundreds of years. They can't die. And you see in that like how death is actually so beautiful because death is like that constant evolution and change and transformation and such an opportunity to let go and release and shift. And so that book also really impacted my like views on death dreaming. And I don't know exactly like where it's so many books and like just me being like into ghost stories, and I have like some Scorpio in my chart. So I like to dive deep and like figure things out. But at some point I remember thinking like we spend so much time planning our lives and so much time dreaming our lives, and it's something like I love to do. I love to dream my life. I love to set intentions, you know. It's like when I think about like what I want in partnership, I want somebody who's like willing to dream life with me. And then why are we not dreaming about our death? Why aren't we consciously creating a way that obviously like life and death are things beyond our control? And we cannot say like, you know, I would love to die in my sleep when I'm 88 years old next to the person that I love. You know, that would be okay. That's like one type of death dreaming that could be like, you know, really a fantasy. But it's more like to connect with the fact that our life is going to end, and that can also be a gift, and that can also be something really beautiful, and that can also be an opportunity to be curious and to learn and to grow and to come back into like what is the value of life, because our life is is so valuable because it is finite.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I think it's interesting. And I've had, obviously, as you know, like a lot of deaths in the last like 2 years. And those are people. They're literally like family members of mine that have, transitioned. But the thing that I think that is so interesting as you left it off is that life is finite. But I think it's finite for the ego, like the part of ourselves that's not actually real. It feels real, but it's not true. It's not the true essence of who we are. We're obviously all an aspect of the one, whether you'd like to call it God, creator, source, universe, whatever it is. But that ego that's born out of necessity, obviously we must show up in the world as, Brittany, Dan, Elise. It would be weird if we didn't have these personas to have conversations like this, to work and make a living and all these things. But it thinks it's separate. And that I think is such a hard concept for our ego selves, the smaller selves, to grasp, because it wants to live and be here and do more and be more and whatever society tells us to do. But then innate truth of who we are, like the intelligence, the divine that's in us, I don't think is afraid of death, because it knows it actually truly cannot die. And I think it's such a beautiful concept to like actually set these intentions to dream a death in a way that is suitable right now for you in however capacity that may be. Like you said, as an 88-year-old in bed next to your beloved, or if it's like I love your death, your Viking death, if you want to share that, like when you told it to us. I don't know if that's still what you want, but I think that that's amazing and incredible. And it's like, yes, we have all these intentions of how we want our life to be. Why couldn't we possibly put that consciousness into the next transition?
Yeah, totally. My Viking funeral. So desiring a Viking funeral, where basically what the Vikings did is when someone would die, they would build a boat for them, and you could write letters or things that were important to you. You put that all on the boat with the body, and then they shoot a flaming arrow onto the boat as the boat goes off into the water. So your body burns on water, basically. So it's also a beautiful combination of the elements and going back to nature. And I became like really into the idea of having that type of a funeral because a good friend of mine actually killed himself when we were young, like 22, and he was a Viking. He had like Scandinavian descent. Wow. And I didn't get to go to his funeral, but that's the funeral that he was given. And I got to write him a letter that his sister printed out and put on the boat. And that just felt so special to me that I was able to, my physical body not there, but to write him that letter to send him off with. And I was always like, wow, what a just like simple, beautiful, the community is coming together in like the building of it and the offering of things to say goodbye.
Oh my God, that's
really cool.
So epic.
I didn't realize that's something that's still done. I'd heard of it like being done hundreds of years ago, but I didn't know people are still having funerals like that.
Yeah, another thing with the death dreaming is there are so many legalities that come into, so it's like you can dream your death and then you have to see like, how can I do it in a way that's also going to fit into like what the government is requiring, right? That's like a funny thing about birth, right? Because it's like birth and death are so intertwined, and it's like, yeah, you can dream your birth, and then you go to like tell the government like, yeah, I just had a baby in my home, I never went to a doctor, and then you have to see like, how can this fit into what standards we have created and developed in the bureaucratic life. And it's so funny that even in the dreaming of your death, these are things that like you have to consider. Right?
I love it. I want to touch upon your friend who mentioned that she wants to have her child have a beautiful like relationship to death. And I love that as an aspect too, because, you know, Dan and um, I would say religion played a really big role in the way that I view death. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where I was like petrified of it because in you know, Christian Catholicism, you're guided to believe that there is a beautiful place to go or a really horrible place to go, and you don't want to go to that really horrible place, and you're going to go there if you like misbehave. And so death to me was always petrifying because I didn't want to go to that horrible place. I wanted to go to heaven. And within my family, like I grew up Italian on like all sides of my family. It's like my mother's heritage, like my father's, and then when they divorced, like my stepfather was even Italian. They're all Catholic, and their relationship to death is kind of like you were talking about. It's just, it's sadness. It's pure grief and sadness, and you mourn and you wear black, and that's it. And there's no understanding of what's actually going on. And I believe that so much of this, and again, it's not to knock religion in any means. Please believe whatever you want to believe. I am glad that I was born into this religious family because it's gotten me to where I am, and it was fascinating. But I think a big part of why I was so petrified is because that religion didn't teach me who I truly am and what truly is happening with the never ending totality of like who we are. And to have this conversation about, I mean, your friend sounds like such a beautiful example of like what conscious parenting is, and like how can we bridge this gap between something that can be so scary into something that's actually beautiful and transformational. And yes, like we had this chicken, but it went away and got eaten by whatever coyote or fox or whatever, but it was that food for that, and it sustained its life, and it perhaps served its purpose for the short amount of time that it was with us.
Yeah, totally. It's like we can also just redefine the conversation around death and dying. And I'm curious, like, well, first of all, that is my thesis. So that was my in school and college was like Catholicism, particularly Catholicism and death anxiety. And so interesting because I'm not Catholic, but I am like from, you know, like a Christian kind of like Southern Baptist family background. But I had been to Rome and I had seen like the frescoes of hell versus heaven. And, you know, I studied religion. So I heard like purgatory, and, you know, there's the Catholic guilt. And so when I chose my thesis and when I created my thesis, I was certain that I would find evidence to support my thesis, right? Which is that like Catholicism leads to anxiety about death because of these really strict definitions of heaven and hell. And my really incredible professor that was working with me on that project purposefully sent me to interview chaplains, so Catholic priests or like kind of higher up people in the Catholic faith who are specifically working in hospitals with people who are dying, so reading them their last rites. And she sent me to interview all of these really amazing chaplains and priests, and what I found is that like I could not find any evidence based on my interviews with these beautiful people to support my thesis, because they were like, purgatory could be an instant and hell is just separation from God. And so if you're not believing in God, then the hell of being separated from God is not, it's not really like this fiery, painful, never-ending torture that we kind of get the idea. You know? So it was really interesting how their knowledge and vocabulary and the intimacy that they had with death, working with death on such a regular basis, and with these religious concepts, really created in me like a peace and a safety, and did not support my thesis at all. So I had to complete my thesis. But then I do, right? And I'm like, okay, but there's still like aspects of this. You still have to dive into this. Like,
yeah, it's so interesting.
There's something like, from my perspective, I feel like a lot of having that, like, sort of like, I mean, I assume it's because of the Catholic faith, but there's a lot of like, you don't talk about that. And it's like, why when you're a kid and you ask questions, like, that's morbid, like, don't bring that up. We don't talk about that kind of thing. And it's pushed under the rug. And it's probably a very different experience for like these chaplains who are in that day in and day out, and they are faced with it, and they have this kind of knowledge base to really understand it and like really grasp the faith. I think most people, this is also like in my perception of Catholicism, there are very few people that really know it. And there's a lot of people who like go to church with a little bit of an idea. And those are the people who are like teaching the CCD classes when you're a little kid. And you go into these people that are like, yo, don't do that. Like, sit there with your hands folded at your desk or you're going to hell. And you get like punished, and like, it's really, really immature. And then I think that there's obviously like within the faith, like there's a lot of people who are very mature with their faith and have a completely different understanding. But
yeah, and it's connected to the shadow. Like, also, it's how deeply that person willing to look and face their own mortality, right? So that comes back to the death dreaming, because it's like, let's have the conversations about it. Let's look at it, you know, let's like dive into it and really like be willing to see what's there. And I'm curious now, like after so many experiences with death and within your family, like, what are your views on death now? How have they changed, and how have you made peace with like that younger version of you that had so much fear?
I think that honestly, because I had begun this spiritual journey, or whatever you'd like to call it, wellness journey, a waking up kind of process within like the last 5 to 8 years, if I didn't have that, I would have probably been like, I probably would have lost my mind with how much death had happened so quickly, especially like people that were like so close to me. But now I think what threw me is when my cousin died, that was the hardest one, certainly, because of this like spiritual ascension that I feel like I'm on. And everybody is saying, you know, you're eternal, like you don't lie, you don't, you know, die, you just transition, you're not losing anything, like they're still there. I just like couldn't grasp that. That's what really I felt like angered me. And I knew that she had like this, in my heart, I feel like this was planned perfectly. Like she chose the family that she came into, meaning my like biological family, but then her own, like with her husband and her children. Like I very much understand we've all signed up for this life. And I mean that in the most beautiful way, to learn and grow and ascend and elevate our sentience, our consciousness, if you will. But I couldn't get over like the debilitating pain that I was feeling for my human self. But I also equally knew to process that and to let that part of me feel what was required to feel. So I wholeheartedly like believe she's still here and with me, and she gives me like signs all the time for sure, and is popping by. Like I don't think her body's not here, right? Where that manifestation of her, but like the energy of her, that consciousness that she held is around. I think it's just in a different, I don't even know if it's a different dimension. I wonder if it really truly is just a different frequency that we experience them through and her through.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like you don't see them in the physical anymore. And yet you can feel them like everywhere. But I feel it like an echo, you know, like it's something, it's like an imprint, because also I know that there's a part of the soul that's continuing its evolution, that's left completely this consciousness behind, like, and is continuing its evolution. But then we still feel their presence. We still feel that imprint. of their life, we still feel the love and the care. It's like seeds of that are buried within us, and when someone dies, like those seeds blossom, you know.
For sure,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like when you feel that, like think of it almost like an essence.
Mm-hmm.
You can like feel their presence even when the physical body isn't there. And I think that like the more often that happens, like I've had some really profound moments of like being visited, I guess, by like the essence of a person who has transitioned out of this life, and it's so undeniable that you just
Mm-hmm.
know that that person's there, and you kind of realize that it wasn't always the physical body that you were actually relating to. You were relating to that essence. It was easy to recognize the physical body because it was actually there. But
Mm-hmm.
that's really changed my perception on experiencing people in a lot of ways, because I recognize that it's actually their essence and their soul that I'm recognizing and in the presence of, and the physical body is just there.
Yeah, totally. It's so interesting, right? Because and then it's like I'm like really also a Taurus, so I love the physical. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, the physical body is like why I'm here on this human plane. Like I love the earth. And then at the same time, it's like we can connect on this podcast and have such a beautiful conversation and like feel your frequency. You know, I can't give you a hug right now, but like I feel your frequency in the same way, you know, and it's like that kind of web of energy that's just underneath everything. So it's fascinating. And
It is. It's so awesome. Okay, I want to go in like a little bit of an interesting direction here, because for anybody listening, go back and listen to our first episode with Brittany. We talk all about psychedelics and their benefits, and we dove very deeply into, well, not too deeply into, but like we touched upon the beautiful psilocybin ceremony that we had in Costa Rica. And one of the intentions that I sent, I don't know if you remember this, well, one of them was truly to release the grief that I had, the sadness that I had from my cousin's passing, because it was just consuming me. That happened like instantaneously, really, within like the first hour. But the second pronged of my intention was to let go of the parts of myself that were no longer serving me. Kind of like, as I was saying, the ego identifiers that I have cultivated over, 3+ decades of who Elise is. And shit, I think I'm pretty sure those parts of me have died for sure, because being now in California for nearly 2 months, it is so unbelievably hard to explain how I'm a different person, because it is a felt experience. It's not an intellectual, cognitive, it's nothing that I can explain. Even to Dan, who is by far, like, other than my cousin who passed, the closest person to me, it's hard for me to describe to him. Hopefully he sees it in different ways, but what a beautiful thing that we're constantly at a cellular level, literally being birthed and dying. How many times a second? Like billions of times a second. That's what makes us able to be here, because we're not really these, suits that we're wearing. But the ego part, like that's such, for me, it's been like the most challenging for sure on this journey that I've been on, but the most beautiful to understand that, oh my gosh, I'm able to, I don't want to use the word kill in a sense, because that sounds kind of bad, but like let go of, really allow this portion of my ego to die, because it is no longer serving me. And it was just keeping me in a place where I was hitting almost like a glass ceiling. And I think that that's such, again, like a hard concept for the ego to grasp, because it doesn't want to die. It's purely wanting to survive, and all of its characteristics that it has. But that is something that I've been so deeply contemplating over the last like couple months, and being like, oh my God, like I feel like I've stepped into a new world. There's so much different feelings of contentment and peace, rather than like a worrisome, fearful, anxious state that I've really honestly lived my life in for, like I said, nearly almost like probably not 3 decades, maybe like 2.5. But that concept of allowing like the ego and the parts of the ego to die and then rebirth is such a beautiful concept.
Mm-hmm. And did you feel like somebody said this to me years ago, and it's just stuck with me, which is everything screams when it dies, right? So it's like in that moment of leading up to it, when you're on the precipice of that massive change, it's like it's loud, you know, in the body and the heart. There's noise there because, you know, there's like a holding on. So then you get to the other side of that, and it's like, oh wow, this is what it feels like, you know, to be like silence or freedom, or, you know, there's so many different words for it, like liberation, because they call the path of the plant medicine the path of liberation. But there's so many paths to liberation, you know, and it's all about that. It's like liberating yourself from that noise and worry. And I wonder, like, do you feel that the move to LA created like a sense of safety that you hadn't had before, that allowed you to go through that process and really like deepen the letting go?
The opposite.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because I believe that like one of the traits that I have uncovered is like a deep fear of like feeling unsafe and abandonment, which allowed me like as a coping mechanism to create codependent relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very like codependent with like my mother, with Dan. And so this move to LA, even though we've lived here before, like obviously we're in a house and in a different area, I think it sparked something within me, because let me back up just a little bit. In Massachusetts, when we were there for like that 2-year period, because I had gone through so much so quickly, I think it was the catalyst for me to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
It was really like leave the nest, even though I had technically left the nest at, 18 or 17 when I left for college. But it was just that energy, the codependent energy and the fear, the really feeling like just unsafe in the life that I had created for myself. So I felt like I grew up in that Massachusetts trip, and now it was life presenting me like, all right, go back to where you always said that you were happiest, which was here in Southern California, and see how it goes. And it's like everything that was normal to me in the energy of safety, like being in my childhood home, or in like not having, I know this sounds silly, but like we didn't have to worry about paying rent and didn't have to worry about utilities and all those things. Again, we had done it before, but like it was just lost in the mix. Now I'm thrown into, oh shit, we have a house, we have landscaping, like we've got like a hefty rent, we've got like, I didn't realize how much like it was to wash my clothes. Like I just didn't think of all these things, and I think it's making me feel very unsafe because I don't have that comfort of like a home stability that I was used to. So it was like a beautiful, I say it's like a beautiful destruction of who I thought I was, but this is what I've asked for. I keep reminding myself of that in a gentle way, that I want to learn, I want to grow, I do want to evolve into a person that is free in a way that I'm not constantly worried about like what other people are thinking of me or anything like that. So I think that all of these things have just been like a stepping stone. I think that being here has taught me like, okay, it's safety isn't with Dan, it's not with my mother, it's not with money, it's not with food, it's not with my workout routine, it's not with my journaling practice. Safety is me. It's within me. And now how can I truly understand what it is that I must provide myself to feel safe now in this new paradigm that I've stepped into?
Wow, so fascinating. I also
I told you I've been going through some stuff, Brittany.
Yeah, wow, I love it. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, I love yours.
I know what you mean.
There's beauty in the breakdown, you know.
Yeah. Do you feel that? Do you feel like you've gone through some like ego deaths and like parts of you that have been let go? I mean, you completely, again, we touched upon this in the first podcast, completely transformed your life.
I have gone through, yeah, some ego deaths. Like lately, the ego death for me has been in the form of like relationship and relating, because I've been like, for such a long time, I've had this deep prayer for partnership and this like longing for partnership and this desiring. And then I had like this beautiful, very short, like spark. Let's just say it was like a very short spark. And then all of the longing, all of the ego, and all of the attachments just wanted to like latch onto that and be like, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want forever, you know? And then life, as it does, just like threw some curveballs at me. And I was like, oh, okay, like I don't always get what I want. And then I had to like look at the old stories that I was telling myself of like, nobody is choosing me, I'm not worthy, like I don't deserve to get what I want. And instead of it just being like, okay, let's see what life wants, you know, like, because life is always moving through us, you know, life and death, like they're constantly, so let's see what life wants. But I was like, no, this is what I want. And now I feel like a child because I can't have it. My ego is hurt. And because I'm really like aware and emotionally intelligent, I'm like very clearly communicating, right? This is what I want. Like, this is what my ego wants. Like, could you just say this to me so that my ego will feel better? And it was like, no, like, I'm not just going to say these things to, you know, like soothe your ego. And so then I had to go deeper into my own shadows and look at like these stories that I'm telling myself. Where are they coming from? Why am I telling myself these stories? How, if I have this story that nobody's going to choose me and I'm not worthy, then how am I like talking and co-creating with life? How am I dreaming that, you know, like, and having to really look at like these, because those are also protections, you know, it's also like, if I have the story, then I'm not surprised by it when it happens. But like, that's what's going to keep coming into my life. And so, yeah, in the last couple of months, it's just been like, okay, my ego is wounded. I feel like a child who didn't get what she wanted. I wonder if I get what I want, you know, we don't always, you know, especially when it comes to something like partnership. And then I was like, okay, I need to go deeper and I need to really look at like how I can give love to myself and how I can step back from like the ego, which is now screaming, like resource myself into the like, okay, I mean, my teacher said to me, like, when I was discussing this with him, he said, if you want to be a medicine woman, you need to know what medicine you need and you need to give it to yourself.
I just got chills.
And I was like, oh wow, you know, and then the ego screams because the ego's like, I know the medicine I want is somebody to love me.
And you kind of have to laugh at it. Like, once you observe yourself and witness enough and do this work of the ego and the shadow and meditating and stuff, it's beautiful because you can laugh at your own thoughts, which are not real.
Circling back to me and my ego, it's been interesting. And what I've noticed is that if I didn't have those, like, let's call them opportunities to be like rejected and then sad and then look at it and see those shadows and those patterns, then I also wouldn't have the opportunities for like such incredible growth and self-reflection and understanding of like, you know, communication and actually what do I want and all of those things on such a deeper level, you know. So I'll always coming back to like, wow, this is hard and this is painful and the ego doesn't want this, and also seeing the opportunity for growth and gratitude and liberation through that difficult.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful.
Obviously, like it's not always easy, and we go through these things, and it's a challenge. Do you think that because you are so like open to exploring the idea of death, do you think that it does allow you to be more maybe conscious through these like smaller transitions in these moments, and like allow you to maybe let go easier, or do you not see it? I'm just curious if there's a correlation there.
I'm like anxiously attached, so I don't let go so easily. I think it's like because I'm anxiously attached and don't let go so easily that I also am so curious, like what's
Okay.
there. But it's almost like the opposite. It's like because I have this attachment, because I feel so deeply like the ending of things, that I also so desire to find peace with it, and the way that it doesn't have to be always sad or always heavy. Or I think like to give yourself the time and space to feel whatever it is that you need to feel is so important. Like that it doesn't have to have a timeline. Even for me in my current like death of my ego, or like this little relationship and this longing that I had to go inside myself so deeply for like weeks. Like couldn't I couldn't come out, and I was like, I can't even explain it. It was like such a tiny little thing that just I had to go so deep inside myself to understand what was happening and to feel the feelings and to be with them. I think I feel really lucky to have such a beautiful community that is like able to support me in that. And I think that maybe that's what helps me to like move through it. I mean, I wouldn't say faster because it doesn't feel fast. It takes and it comes in waves, and sometimes I feel fine, and then sometimes I feel like the saddest person.
Yeah.
That totally
but
makes sense.
but I think that like what's really important is just like allowing yourself the time and space, allowing yourself to go inward, allowing yourself to go outward, like finding the gratitude, and then also being really okay with being like, this sucks, this is hard, this is sad, it feels unfair. And
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, as you describe that, it sounds like you're doing it very consciously. And like
yeah,
there's no pushing it away. You're really in it.
yeah, I'm definitely really in it. Like but I love feelings, right? So I'm like that is why I'm alive. Like I really feel like in my death, or like in my next, like whatever happens after we die, that we don't get to experience this depth of feeling. So I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to just feel it. It's so uncomfortable, but like, wow, I think that's why I came here. It's just to feel
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to just like think about and contemplate the idea that, possibly, most likely, like our souls chose this because the most exciting thing we could possibly do is feel things and go
Mm.
feel separation and pain and struggle and have things not be easy and really feel it.
Yeah, totally. That's why when the chaplain said to me, like, well, hell is just separation from God, that was just like such a switch for me, because I was like, okay, hell is separation from God. My understanding of God is that I am it. It is everything. So then
Mhm.
hell is separation from myself, right? Like
Yeah.
hell is separation from my feelings, my emotion, like, and how interesting is that, right? Because then you come back to the ego, and like, what is myself? Like, what is that sense of identity that I have, and how can I be separated from divinity? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I could not agree more, and that wholeheartedly is right in alignment with my view now. But I'm gonna tell you, like growing up, no priest ever said that to me, like that distinction of hell is your being separate from, like that was not taught to me. Like I figured that out through other means of ways. So I think it's like beautiful that there are these people and priests and chaplains that have that uh thought and can relay that information, especially to people who are transitioning at the last moments or days of their lives. I think that that's really cool. Okay, I want to this is kind of fun. It's going to be a question for all of us to answer really quickly, and then I want to, before like wrapping up, I want to hit on the feminine aspect. But okay, what it like truly right now, like if you were to like die tomorrow, like,
mhm.
would you be completely content? And like, if not, what is that fear that would be in you? And I can go first if either of you want to take a second to think
Yeah,
about it.
if you answer, you can go if you already have the answer.
So this has been my, I think, fear, not only of death, but like really of life itself. And I can't remember, Brittany, if you, because you partaked in so much of the the retreat with Jesse last year, but I can't remember if you had been there when I was talking about like how I've been petrified to feel things in my life and I've pushed down my feelings for so long. But to me, what scares me the most about death and transitioning is if it would be painful. I don't want to feel pain. Like I don't want physical pain. The thought of me now, like transitioning to whatever frequency or dimension or whatever is required next for my soul's growth, that doesn't scare me. That's actually really, really interesting. And from how many documentaries and podcasts, and we had someone who had like a near-death experience, and just hearing people talk about those kind of experiences, especially too, like with my like hypnotherapy background, like people who go in and just are like at that oneness with God, like they're like, this is the best thing ever, like I just want to stay here. So it's like I have that curiosity and like a deep, like, okay, like I know that I'm going to be okay and welcomed, and I can't even fathom what that bliss and union and remembrance is going to feel like. My only reservation is like my ego and that feeling like I don't want it to be painful. So I feel like there's a seesaw, right, going back and forth. I still haven't transitioned, or I guess it's really a story, right? If we're talking about like, that's the ego, everything that we're thinking we should be or should be thinking, all of these thoughts, they're narrations, they're narratives, they're stories that the ego is telling us. So I'm trying to rewire and rework that story and that narrative that I have, that it would possibly in any way be painful, because that scares me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then it's like an exploration also of our relationship with pain, which really is what we're going to talk about next. I did a 3-day Vipassana recently, and it's really painful to meditate for like 10 hours a day. Yeah. And especially in stillness. And what I was working with is like the teacher being like, what if you don't call it pain? What if you just call it sensation? And then what if you're exploring the sensations in your body with curiosity versus that visceral, like pushing away of the pain, being like, okay, the sensation.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, that's really interesting. Just like, what if it's not pain? What if it's just sensation? It's sensation in the body, and we're feeling the sensation. And so then there's not that like push of like, I don't want this. I don't want to feel this. And then I feel like, especially if it's so close to the end, then it's an opportunity, right, to like continue that exploration and see like what's there. And then at the same time, nobody wants to suffer, and nobody wants to see anybody suffer. But that's the thing about death, is like nobody is suffering in the death. It's the thinking about it, the leading up to it, like in the dying.
It's the story. That's what I'm saying. Yes, totally.
I was actually journaling about this morning, because over the last like maybe 3 days, I've had this really deep knowing. Yeah, I'll back up. I'll kind of tell the whole thing. So I've had this really deep knowing that like in this moment, all of my needs are met. And it's like, it's one of those things that like you hear it all the time, and like I would say it, but like never really felt it, like really deeply, truly felt it. And I was meditating the other day and just like really felt it, like, okay, right now, no matter what, like even if I don't take another breath in this moment, I'm fine. It's not like if I'm hungry, like that's all projected into the future. There's a bill to pay, there's somewhere to be, like none of that exists. Those are thoughts. Right now, everything is perfect. And I really sat with it, and like it really, really resonated. And then as I was journaling this morning about it, I was thinking the idea of like that the difference between pain and suffering. And I love that you said the sensation instead of pain, because that's what it is. Like we're going to feel pain because it's inevitable. It's a part of being a human. But suffering is attached to the idea that we think it's going to last forever. And the pain isn't going to stop. But when you know the pain's going to stop, it's just pain. I've done things painfully just to feel pain before. It's fine because you know it's going to end. Like go in a cold tub or something like that. It's like, it's painful and it sucks, but it's also beautiful when you just give into it and be like, oh, this is going to end, but for right now, I'm going to feel it. And then it's like the deepest meditation. So it's like this idea of just understanding and like really embodying the pain or embodying the sensation of that moment without attaching a story to it and without believing there's going to be suffering. So I think from that sense, I'm really comfortable with the idea of death and just knowing that I'm going to die, because I know like nothing's forever, and that it's just like my needs are met, and then if in the moment that I die, then we'll see what happens. I don't know. We'll find out. But then the other thing I think, as far as resignations and fears go, I can definitely say that like I have not lived my life to the fullest up to this moment. And I haven't just like been free. And I think so much of it is like these stories and the suffering that I project onto myself, and these ideas of like, oh, this isn't perfect. And then I just like manifest more and more and more, like you're saying before, like recreating this idea of the things that aren't right, rather than just actually realizing that everything is actually perfect and I am a fractal of God. So I'm the one that's creating it. So I don't know. There's something there.
Really
It's been a really cool experience over the last 3 days to feel this really, really deeply. And timing wise, for Elisa's question, knowing this right now, I feel really, really comfortable with death. But also, I know that I'm starting like in this moment, because it's the only one. I want to live my life more fully. I want to feel things more. I want to be more free, and I'm the only one that can give that to myself.
And are there like some solid examples, or like some, like what does it feel like to live your life more freely, or what does that look like for you?
I think it's not necessarily like a bucket list kind of idea, but it's just being more present in every moment, like feeling the love I have for people around me and not worrying about what else is going on. It's like that kind of stuff more so. Like I regret that more than like not going on trips to places or doing cool things. It's like I just want to be in the moment more.
Yeah, the infinite present moment.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's so, I mean, I recently did my second vision quest, so it's a very deep prayer, and it's like four full 24-hour cycles without food or water. And the last day is the day of the gratitude. And I found so much gratitude for the infinite present moment, because when you don't have anything to busy your mind with, you know, it's like, I don't need to think about eating. I don't need to think about drinking. Like, then you're there. You're just in the present moment. And it's like bliss. It's amazing, you know, and it's all we have. And then the answer to my question is, or to your question for me, is so the opposite of the present moment, right? Because it's like this deep longing that I have for partnerships. I'm like, okay, if I die now and then I don't have this like relationship that I'm longing for, then I feel like there's like my soul has this longing and it wasn't able to be like brought to completion, or like, you know, the age old, like, I don't want to die alone. But then it's like, I'm so not alone.
No, yeah, of course. It's a paradox. Yeah.
This present moment, like, I'm here with you, I'm here with my friends, you know, we're never alone with nature. Like, but my like immediate response to like, if I was gonna die right now, what would be like my regret, or how would I, it's like I have this such a deep longing for like partnership and like a healthy relationship, you know, like this beautiful thing that I want to create with another human being. And so I feel like, okay, if I die now, then maybe there's like a part of me that's not complete, you know. And that's just skipping the present moment completely, of like, I am not alone.
No, yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Oh, see, I knew that that was going to be like a little bit fun. I knew we'd all have our own unique kind of perspective on what that is. Okay, so they do really want to tie in the feminine because I think that it's fascinating.
I think it circles into the conversation really well in the idea of like death and suffering, because for me, like with my monthly cycle, there's always been pain like associated with it, like and so I think that's the tie-in, is because that's like a moment, right, where a piece of us is shedding and dying. Like it's the connection that we have to death. It's like a very visceral connection, and there's so much wisdom that can be gained there.
Yes, let's go into this. Yes, perfect.
But then also because like often because I don't want to feel the pain, I don't get access to the information. You know, because it's like in my avoidance of the pain, instead of looking at it as sensation and exploring like, okay, what is my relationship to death? Like, how can I be with this pain and where can it take me? Which is, it's like every month we get to ask ourselves that. For me, and I know that like not all women feel pain with their cycle, so it's also different. But like for me, every month I'm looking at my relationship with pain, and it's like this month I couldn't go there, so I just took Advil and like drank a beer, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is my capacity. Like,
Wait, I'm so glad that we brought this up, and we'll wrap up. And this is how, again, the universe presents me with what I am, required to learn and grow through. I do believe that I co-created this. Oh my gosh, like, why have I never thought about the pain that I do feel during my monthly cycle? Oh my gosh, because I am someone who feels it very deeply. And I also, since gosh, we're going on maybe like 7 or 8 years now, like I can't even remember the last time I took any type of pill. Like I don't take Advil, I don't take ibuprofen, like nothing. Like if I have a headache or anything, and like when the monthly cramps come, I'm like, no, I'm feeling this, and it's sometimes it's debilitating. Like I've been in the fetal position, I throw up sometimes. Like it is that bad. Of course, like I didn't even think of that as something to have reverence and then connect and contemplate with my fear of pain, because I do, like I feel that a lot during that 28-day cycle.
mm-hmm.
So I wonder why. I see that's interesting, because I'm willing and able to do that during my cycle, but not pertaining to like death in a way.
Yeah, because like you're like, I'm not taking any medicine, so you're already doing it. Like I'm here like I need the medicine. Like,
oh no, there's no judgment, please. Yeah, no, no, please do you.
You're already doing it. Like you're being like willing to sit with the pain, and really like not take any out. So it's fascinating because it's like you're already facing your fear over and over and over again.
I know, and I think so. This is where I go back and like now I'm seeing it almost. It's like that part of me, which I do believe is obviously like part of the ego or shadow, whatever. It's like it wants to keep me this way. It wants to keep me in the narrative that I'm afraid of death because I'm afraid of fearing pain, so that it doesn't lose itself. So itself, that story doesn't die.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Or at least that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, of course. Like it's so fascinating, the things that we fear, right? Because it's like when you face the fear, then you fly. Like then there's so much growth when the pain no longer has the power over you.
Yeah.
But it's just like it's so interesting. Do you feel like when you're there present with the pain, do you feel like you're also learning? Like, do you explore it with curiosity, or is it just like too overwhelming to even like think?
The thing that I fight a lot, and I use that word fight, is because it is again like a story that I try to pay attention to, but I also try to mitigate, is that I'm being lazy. Because it's like a pain where I'm just like I'm on the couch or I'm in bed all day, or night, which depending on when it comes. But because for so long, and this was like my understanding, and one of the things that I am letting go of in this ego death is that I've tied my worth so much to doing. Do, fix, be, rescue, like do everything. So the days that I have, you know, that cycle, and especially like the debilitating pain, when I'm just like on the couch or bed, like my story is going crazy of, you could be doing this, the pain's not that bad, hurry up and go do, like, even if it's the dishes or vacuum or go do something. So it's almost like I probably don't feel to the extent that's required to feel the pain, to actually be in that present moment, because I'm in like a story.
Yeah. Yeah. And the pain is a portal, you know,
Yeah.
if you allow yourself to feel the pain, which is so not easy. The pain is a portal. Like, there's this woman, Sophie Strand, she's amazing. And she talks a lot about this. And I did a course with her, The Body is a Doorway, which is incredible. And she talks about how pain is a portal to presence, because when you're in pain, you can't be in the past, you can't be in the future, because you're immediately in the painful present. So it's like a trigger for presence that is undeniable. And so it's almost like illness, dis-ease, pain is actually a psychedelic experience, you know? And that idea really fascinating. I also have like a very interesting relationship with pain because I don't enjoy it. You know, in small ways, in big ways, like I find ways to avoid pain, you know, and and it's just like, it's so interesting when you can like surrender into it, the depth that you're able to surrender into it. But that desire to do it, it's such a masculine thing, right? And so like at immediate odds with the feminine cycle of birth and death and shedding, because it's like, are you going to tell a dying person that they should be doing things? Yeah. Somebody's there on their deathbed and it's like, you need to get out there and like do the dishes, vacuum, like what are you doing?
Oh my God, thank you for bringing like that humorous light into that, because it totally, yes, of course, like duh, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I love, yes, pain as a portal. Wow. Gosh, this is something that I will explore for sure. Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and you
concept. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Warrior of rest. So like for me, something that was like part of what brought me to Costa Rica was actually my relationship with my monthly cycle and how painful that it was, and how no doctor would ever like really go deep into my health history or like ask me the questions. There wasn't an integrative approach to my pain. It was always just like, take hormonal birth control. That's it. So part of what led me to Costa Rica was like a yearning for like a deeper understanding, to take that health and that pain and like into my own hands and find out more about it. And it's just been such an interesting journey, which I can't tell you the whole thing, but I ended up being in a deep study of a Colombian lineage of medicine where they view your moon or your period as like an energy of creation, a very strong energy. And so when you have that, when you're present with that, you actually like shouldn't cook, and actually you don't work. And it was so like, at first my mind, my Western mind was like, I'm just being exiled, right? Like always, like it's like just another way to like be pushed to the side and like, you know, like that's what the Western mind wants to do. And it's like, no, actually. And then I thought about it and I was like, how beautiful is it that I can just call my friends, my teachers, these men in my life that I look up to, and I can say, hey, I'm bleeding and I'm not going to come to work and I'm not going to do anything actually. And they can say like, yeah, have a really beautiful rest, you know, like build yourself a nest and stay there. It's always the advice. And it's so amazing to get that advice and that kind of dialogue and relationship. And I'll have to, like, for myself, the more that I've leaned into it, like even with like this month, right? I didn't have work. Like I had a singing lesson. I had like a yoga class I was going to go to. And instead I was just like, no, I'm not going to show up for this singing lesson. I'm not going to go to this yoga class. Like, I'm not going to even schedule an appointment with my therapist. Like, I'm going to just cancel everything. Like, I have a written schedule, so I erase it. And I even told you, like, I might cancel the podcast. Like, nobody's going to force me to do anything. But then we had this beautiful conversation about how connected it is, our cycles to life and death and rebirth. And so maybe it's like a perfect time to have the conversation. But it's like really beautiful to give yourself permission to just say like, no. And I understand that that looks so many different ways for so many different people. But I just love to use that time as to say like, I'm actually in this bubble of life and death, and it's a portal, and it deserves my attention, and it's actually like an offering to the world to be able to give it my attention, you know?
Yeah, that is such a beautiful reframe and different perspective that I am going to begin embracing. And I think that it's so lovely, kind of as this birth and death cycle, and yeah, honoring that, truly honoring it, and having the relationship that serves in a better way than the kind of do go masculine aspect that is there obviously and very helpful at certain times of the month, but not that one. And to really embrace that. I'm curious as we wrap up, because I loved that we're kind of ending on this like feminine birth and death creation, especially with the cycle, and that happening so frequently within like every month. Do you know what that cycle is for like the masculine? Like the birth and death cycle, if there's any like that?
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because I think one thing that's like women are the portal, like women are the creators and destroyers of life, right? But men are also like having those hormonal fluctuations, let's call it. Like, okay, I don't have a male body, so I don't know what it's like to be in a male body. But sometimes my male friends will say, like, I'm just feeling really low energy right now. Like, I'm just feeling like really easily irritated right now. And I say, like, I don't know, like maybe that's where you are in your cycle right now, you know, like you're hitting, because it's like a winter, basically, like when you're bleeding is winter, right? So it's like maybe you're in your winter, and we're all cyclical beings, you know, everything is a cycle. So I think that it probably just looks like for men, like they're tired and then they brush it off, or they don't give it the attention. And like what women can do, because not all women are bleeding, and you know, for various reasons, is that you can take like you can look at the moon, right? So you can start to study it as a man, and you can say like, I noticed that when the moon is full, I feel more agitation, I feel more tired. And when I notice that when it's new moon, I feel really vibrant and alive and like in my, you know, like sexual energy. And then you can just like track the cycles of life based on nature and see where there are synchronicities. And it's so personal. But I would say like that for me, that would be like how it is. I'm curious like how it's resonating for you, Dan, but that's just kind of what
I think you're absolutely right that there are cycles, and I think because it's never talked about, I haven't thought about it. I've never charted out like with the moon or anything like that. Like I don't know what the rhythm is, but I know that there's a rhythm.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So it would be so interesting to just like explore that. Like, what does that look like for you? And then when it feels like you're in that winter, like what would it be like to just give yourself full permission to say, like, I'm not going to work, like, I'm not going to cook right now. Like, I'm just going to sit here and be in this feeling and give myself this time and space and see like what can be gained from that.
Yeah, I think that that's like a beautiful invitation for all men or however I guess you'd like to identify in that sense of it. Yeah, that's so interesting. I loved this conversation. This was so much fun.
I know, it's so nice to see you guys.
My only question to you is, again, because you've been on the show before, like we will link your website. And so it's like, oh, where can people find you? Like, we don't necessarily need to say that unless you wanted to bring forth any like last words. I want to open that up to make sure like you leave the audience with anything. And we can obviously like put anything in the show notes that you want us to give our listeners.
Yeah, it's like the best way to stay updated is through a WhatsApp group. So I have a WhatsApp group. It's called Witchy Business, and you can put the link in the
show notes. Yes, we'll absolutely do that.
Part of the WhatsApp group can join. I really don't flood it with messages, and I mostly
you don't actually at all. When I see it come through, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I try to really consciously not flood it with messages and just post like offerings that I have, or if there's some like really delicious mushroom things that my friends are doing. Sometimes I share those things.
Awesome. Oh gosh. Well, again, we are just delighted, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, Brittany. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for being with me on this rainy day.